Modern residential spaces provide immense physical comfort. We control the climate, the lighting, and the layout. Yet beneath that comfort, the home often demands a constant stream of sensory inputs that triggers extreme physiological dysregulation in the people living inside it. We expect the family home to serve as a grounding retreat. In practice, the daily reality often consists of frequent childhood meltdowns, chronic sibling conflict, and pervasive adult burnout. We tend to misdiagnose the root cause of these breakdowns. We view a child refusing to put on shoes or a parent snapping over a spilled cup as a behavioral compliance issue or a failure of emotional discipline. An escalating voice or a sudden tantrum usually indicates that the environment is asking the nervous system to process too much simultaneous data. To accurately address this, we have to look at the household through the framework of sensory ecology. This approach defines the home as a highly active, interactive system of stimuli. Analyzing a space this way requires mapping two specific components. First, we identify the environmental inputs, the noise, the screens, the clutter, acting as sparks. Second, we measure those sparks against the finite processing bandwidth of the inhabitants. By identifying where the inputs exceed capacity, we can engineer the architecture and the daily schedule to include distinct points of temporal and spatial relief, known as resets. Behavioral interventions fail when they are used to treat what is essentially a physical environment problem. This capacity meter demonstrates how environmental variables saturate cognitive load over time. Every sound, transition, and object requires processing power from both child and adult. Visual clutter is a heavy input. When a space is covered in scattered toys, the ambient data load rises rapidly. A child's brain perceives an excess of options as a single, overwhelming, and unmanageable dataset. The sheer number of choices paralyzes play. Instead of focusing, the child bounces erratically from one object to another, dumping bins without actually using the contents. When the volume of choices, sounds, and instructions pushes a child's bandwidth to total saturation, the system collapses into hyperactivity and defiance. Simultaneously, the parent absorbing that chaos hits their own ceiling, and the adult system flashes into reactive anger. For an adult, the systemic failure often manifests as a sharp voice, a desperate need to clear space, or a physical aversion to being touched and needed for one more minute. A mother feeling trapped in her own living room is operating a biological system that has been filled completely beyond its capacity. What we punish as defiance in children and feel guilty for as anger in ourselves are predictable error codes. They are the natural physiological outputs of neurological overload. This line graph charts stimulation levels during digital screen use. Tablets and televisions serve as efficient delivery systems for intense visual and auditory inputs, locking the brain into a sustained state of high arousal. Inside that elevated plateau, the brain is processing rapid cuts, bright colors, and constant dopamine reward loops at a speed physical reality cannot replicate. The moment the screen turns off, the user experiences this sheer drop-off. The sudden shift from a high-stimulation digital environment to the slower pace of the physical room generates massive transition friction. The crying, bargaining, and exhaustion that follow a screen turning off are the physical consequences of a brain being abruptly dropped into a low-stimulus reality. To safely span that gap, the architectural sequence of the home requires a landing plan. A landing plan utilizes bridging activities to catch the brain. By transitioning directly from a screen to a predictable tactile or caloric input, like eating a snack, playing with wooden blocks, or going outside, the nervous system can step down its arousal gradually. Setting a screen boundary without a dedicated neurochemical bridge to catch the transition will consistently result in systemic conflict. If we zoom out to view a full circadian cycle, we can map how microstress accumulates over the day. This upward creep of the arousal baseline must be intercepted by precise temporal interventions. The first intervention node is the morning reset. A morning routine packed with rapid-fire questions about clothing, breakfast, and schedules forces early-day decision fatigue, depleting cognitive reserves before the child even leaves the house. We preserve processing load by transferring instructions out of the parent's mouth and into the environment. We minimize clothing choices and implement static visual charts to guide the routine, drastically lowering the morning's verbal noise. The second and most critical node arrives in the late afternoon window, where the arousal line hits its highest peak. This crash point represents the highest allostatic load of the day. The home is messy, the parent has decision fatigue, and the children are hungry and dysregulated. Mitigating this spike requires precise physiological interventions before the crash occurs. The system needs blood sugar stabilization through food, followed by proprioceptive input, heavy physical work or outdoor movement, to release built-up tension. The final intervention is the evening downshift. Notice how the arousal line here forms a staircase rather than a cliff. Sleep is the final result of a gradual deceleration. A child cannot move from chaos into deep rest simply because the clock dictates it. 60 to 90 minutes prior to bedtime, the protocol demands a sharp reduction in data. Screens end, loud toys are put away, overhead lights soften, and ambient noise is actively suppressed. These temporal reset nodes artificially lower the baseline arousal state before the pressure in the house reaches a breaking point. We pair that temporal structure with physical spatial regulation. By mapping the layout of the home, we can designate functional zones by localizing calm anchors. Low-stimulation design accommodates a wide range of aesthetics and lifestyles. It relies on functional zoning, establishing isolated physical locations, such as a quiet floor cushion or a dimly lit reading chair, where ambient noise and visual stimuli are strictly limited. Crucially, the architecture must include a designated anchor for the adult. Children rely on the biological mechanism of co-regulation. They use the steady state of a parent's nervous system to calibrate and settle their own. Yet, caregivers routinely ignore their own sensory limits. They absorb the noise, the touching, and the interruptions until they snap, mistakenly viewing constant self-depletion as a requirement of caregiving. If the adult's processing bandwidth is entirely saturated, their ability to co-regulate a dysregulated child is physically impossible. When we actively map the relationship between inputs, capacity, and transitions, the logic of the system becomes clear. Building a regulated environment is an exercise in subtraction. Family life cannot be optimized by purchasing more sophisticated organizational bins, nor can it be controlled by mastering a stricter set of discipline techniques. Peace in the home is achieved by identifying the points of neurobiological friction and removing them. A regulated home allows for messy, joyful play. It provides the physical and temporal margin required to process the world around them.